Hello and welcome to a very special program as we continue our coverage of the World Economic Forum meet here in Davos, Switzerland. On this program, a very special guest, Sir Martin Sorrell. He talks to us about why he feels the India story is so positive, why there's so much interest over here in Davos on India. We'll also be joined by the MD of Mahindra, Dr. Anisha, and Nadir Godrej as well, to give you an idea of what India has been all about here in Davos. It's been a fascinating World Economic Forum annual meeting over here in Davos, Switzerland, for all sorts of reasons. Firstly, the topics which have been identified this year: artificial intelligence, that's been a huge focus, sustainability. But the backdrop of all of this is the crisis that we face in so many parts of the world, the war in West Asia, the expansion of that war in the Red Sea area, the continuing crisis in the Ukraine. Amidst all of this, there's the India growth story. India, quite clearly an outlier to global growth, which is what, about 2.9%, India growing at more than 7%. Joining us now, a wonderful guest, Sir Martin Sorrell. Thank you very much, sir.
That was a Bollywood introduction.
Was it?
Yeah.
What for you was the highlight of Davos this time? Was it the themes picked up? Was it the India story, perhaps?
Well, obviously the India story was, we had, what was it, 3 states who had...
4 states, actually.
4, was it 4?
And lots of ministries.
And lots of ministries. I think the coordination is important when you have that amount of effort. So that was a highlight. But I think, look, I think my sort of takeaway, as they say, was that people are a little bit more optimistic than I anticipated. I mean, that's English understatement. We had one session yesterday where, there were journalists in it, and the journalists tried to bring everybody back to what they thought was reality. The comment was, you must be smoking something. Because the people, there were government ministers, finance ministers, there were the private sector, including representation from India. And the general mood, when asked, do you think 2024 will be better than 2023, almost a majority of the people in the room put their hands up, which of course,
and said yes.
Yes.
That's surprising.
Which is very surprising, because coming here, there's the doom and gloom surrounding the 3. I mean, you touched on 2 of them. There's obviously US-China relationships, or lack of them, from which India benefits, actually. Secondly, there's the Russia-Ukraine situation, and thirdly, Iran, and who thought that we would have Iran and Pakistan trading missiles with one another whilst we've been sitting here.
The leaders were sitting in Davos.
Yes, absolutely, and berating one another in Davos. So I think that's the biggest thing. You mentioned AI. There's a lot of chat around it. There's a lot of focus on it. We can get into the detail of how it affects our industry. The big thing for 2024 is the development of use cases, of case studies, of how AI is working and will work. That's going to be absolutely critical, because the chip producers, principally NVIDIA, are adding to capacity. They're selling chips like hot dinners, and they're selling processors like hot dinners. And the question is, does demand peak? So in order to continue to stimulate demand, there has to be concrete identification of opportunities, and that's going to be the task for 2024. For example, in our case, we get projects at the moment, $500,000 here, $1 million there. What we're looking for is the big technological transformation projects. The other thing I think about Davos is it underlines the 2 things that we see going on. One is geographical fragmentation. The days of Ted Levitt and the Harvard Business Review in 1983 of globalization and consumers consuming everything the same way, that still holds, but in a very much more fragmented way because of the 3 geopolitical risks, quite apart from climate change, North Korea and the other things that we have to deal with. So that uncertainty. So one thing is focus on the growth areas. That's where the India story becomes so potent and powerful. So North and South America, that block is going to become more and more important. I think it's fanciful to believe that America will become a traditional labor manufacturing economy again, with labor rates rising like the UAW agreement by 25% over 4 years. It's unrealistic to believe. You might build chip factories in Columbus, Ohio, between Brookfield and Intel, but if you want to deal with your supply chain, Apple and Tesla go to Mexico. So Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay.
Yes.
We'll see how Malay does in Argentina. That block, very important. Middle East,
Yes.
huge vision. You see it here
Absolutely.
on the promenade and in Davos, and not just Saudi, UAE, Qatar, huge vision. And these are visions that are not the usual nation branding thing. It's not just about the Olympics or the World Cup or Formula One or a combination of all three. It's about changing the way that countries around the world globally think about Saudi, think about the UAE, think about Qatar culturally.
A final question and a focused question on India.
Yeah.
Has it been a mini India on the promenade this year in your
Yes,
opinion?
I think it is. I think this is...
And why the interest in India? I mean, I sense a great deal of interest in
what I said, growth. If you're looking...
Would you like to talk a little bit more about
I think
what people are saying or how you see that growth story?
Modi has done a fantastic job. He's not just a great prime minister, but he understands brand. And he understands the importance of it. I mean, he is the chief brand officer of India, and some presidents and prime ministers don't think that communication is that important. You know, in our own case, you know, Cameron and indeed the joint government with the Lib Dems, Cameron and Clegg, did understand
Yes.
that. It was interesting when Theresa May became Prime Minister, she moved the Great Britain campaign, which I still think is the best example of branding, you know, a template for all ministries to use. So you pull it all together. Because the trouble with communications at government level is it becomes disintegrated. Each minister has his favourite agency, relationship, whatever, and they all go off in different directions. Cameron was originally a PR guy.
Yeah.
And I think he understood and still understands, as does Nick Clegg, who's now working at Meta. They understood the importance of communication, and that's central. When Theresa May came in, she moved it out of 10 Downing Street, and she didn't regard herself, I think, as being the chief brand officer. She didn't have time for that, and that's a big mistake. Modi understands that. I think he'll get re-elected, and I think the reason why India is such a focus. I mean, I'm from the UK, and as we were talking about in the preparation for this, you know, India is a bigger economy than the UK, which is distinctly uncomfortable for all us Britons to swallow, just like it's uncomfortable for the Americans to swallow that China might be bigger than the US. So no, it's growth. It's growth. And India, you've got great core sources of talent, rather like Latin America, which gets underplayed.
Yes, that's true.
Great sources of tech talent, great sources of people. You know, I mentioned Harvard Business School, all the great professors and the dean himself. Twice in a row.
Yes.
Where do they come from?
Yeah.
They come from India. Yeah. So I think, and the great entrepreneurs, you know, the Ambanis, the Bhartis, I mean, it's Mittal, I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So, and those entrepreneurs having built their businesses in India and now expanding globally around the world. And so Davos is a good vehicle for them. And you can see, you know, I hate the phrase global north and global south because it's a mixture of the two. But you can see in this rebalancing of the world economy, this different polarization of the economy, not US dominated. The Americans find that very difficult to come to terms with, particularly the center of America, not so much the east and west coast and the Republicans. You know, the world is changing, and actually Davos, to your point, reflects that.
Sure.
So where you see the investment being made and the money being spent, you know, you see it around the Arab nations, you see it around India, you see nations that have aspirations and ambitions using it as an experiential vehicle to develop their brands. So it's all part of nation branding.
Sir Barton, wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Good to
much,
see you.
sir,
Thank
for
you,
being with
Vishnu.
us.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of the most exciting sectors in the Indian economy, and an area that India is showing a great deal of technological prowess besides anything else, is the auto sector. We're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Anisha, with us. Mahindra, very much a leader in India in so many spaces. The big buzz in Davos for the last several years, in fact, has been EVs, electric vehicles. That's an area you've invested a great deal. Could you share with us the interest that you see in Mahindra in the EV space when you come here and speak to people over here?
So EV clearly is for the future, and We've got an outstanding platform. So the interest in Mahindra has been not just at Davos, but over the last couple of years. We've had a number of investors actually approach us wanting to invest in our platform. It has been benchmarked against some of the best in the world and stands out far ahead. So we're waiting for our EVs to launch. I've driven 3 of the 5 born electric SUVs that we're going to launch, and they are wonderful. And they should be launched later this year. We promised December 24. We're on track for that, maybe slightly ahead. So stay tuned for that.
No, absolutely we will. You, of course, do have excellent diesel engines as well, which you've refined, petrol engines. When do you make a larger, or when do you see India, the Indian market, make a stronger transition to EVs in terms of percentage of sales?
It starts with products. So as we come up with our SUVs, we're confident that there will be a much stronger push towards EV. The second step will be infrastructure. To start with, people who can charge at home will buy EVs because we will not have an infrastructure that can support it. And as we get more cars on the road, the infrastructure will start growing as well. So it is a journey, but it is a journey that I think will happen rapidly. We expect about 30% of our production to be EVs in 27, about 3 years from now. And we expect about 50% by 30. By 30, we should be making 1 million EVs, many for markets outside India as well.
One of the concerns has been on range that's associated with batteries which are available. Particularly in our hot, humid conditions, range becomes a bit of a concern. Are you satisfied with the pace at which battery technology is developing?
From a range standpoint, there are no issues anymore. So the EVs that we have will have sufficient range. We are putting in some of the latest technology in batteries as well, and that helps both from a range standpoint and a safety standpoint.
What about costs to make EVs more easily available to the common person?
Cost needs to be somewhat at par with ICE. It cannot be significantly higher, and that's what we are working towards. So it's about the entire package, because someone buying a car is going to look at the design, how it rides, the features in the car, the cost, all of those factors. So that's something we are very conscious of, and based on where we are, and frugal engineering has been one of our strengths, along with very high quality, we should be able to deliver something to the consumer that they actually really like.
Safety is also obviously a concern across your platforms. Could you tell us about how certain aspects of EVs which require additional safety steps is something that you focused on very closely as well?
So safety is number one for us. Safety comes first. Everything else is later. And for us, the latest battery technology was important. It is LFP, which is lithium ferrous phosphate. And the way it is packaged, the way it is protected, will ensure safety at a very, very high level. And that's something that we actually started with, saying, let's ensure that there is no issue from a safety standpoint. And our teams have done a very good job in ensuring that.
We are finally seeing safety standards being implemented in India quite strongly. You've had very good reviews and ratings over there. Could you share with our viewers a little bit about your thoughts on the importance of these safety standards and how Mahindra is doing?
So safety standards, again, I think is critical, because even without standards, OEMs should have a very, very high standard for safety, because consumers have to be protected first. And therefore, we have always welcomed safety standards. We've stayed at the highest level. We've always strived for a 5-star safety rating, and have got it for almost all our vehicles now. And therefore, it's one that is the most important for us. Mahindra stands for safety. And yes, we stand for many other things, but that comes after safety.
A larger question on the group, the focus over here in Davos has also been sustainability. How is that a core issue and agenda for the Mahindra Group across all your businesses?
So Mahindra has been a leader in that. We began our sustainability efforts in 2008, well before it became a headline for everyone. We were among the first to sign up for science-based targets in 2014. About 14 of our businesses signed up for that. We have achieved 95% energy productivity, and this is something that was highlighted at Davos, even at the International Business Council at the World Economic Forum. And that is a stupendous achievement. What that really means is that we're using half the energy that's required for the same level of output.
Right.
And that has been done by our teams who've done 3,600 projects over that time period. So it's not one big effort, you do this and you're done. It's a series of efforts, and therefore the culture in the company has been to embrace sustainability and ensure that from a climate change standpoint, we are one of the leaders. At the World Economic Forum, we are recognized as one of the leaders as well. In a number of areas, we are leading alliances. We are part of the First Movers Coalition, a founder member there, and are really part of the thought leadership in driving sustainability. One of the newest initiatives we are launching is also around green buildings. We've launched a couple of residential net zero communities in India, and this is again an innovation that will really transform buildings and create a much better environment for combating climate change.
We've both been to Davos now for quite a few years. I've had the opportunity of interviewing you in the past as well. What's the big change over here? Is there a change from an India standpoint?
There is a much greater focus on India, and that's something we've seen over the years. There was something which started last year and this year has been continuing. Everyone's asking about India. Folks who are in India, how do we expand more? Folks who are not in India, I've met with a very large number of global CEOs over the last 4 days, and that's something that's top of mind for them. And I think the government has done a very nice job in ensuring ease of business and being able to attract investors to come into India. And I think that's something is very essential for Make in India, the vision that's there, and to be able to achieve the Viksit Bharat goals that the Prime Minister has set out. So on all of those fronts, I think things are moving really well, and that augurs extremely well for India and its economy.
What were some of the questions these global CEOs were asking you about India? What is their area of specific interest? Just the overall story or opportunities or what?
So the questions were first, what has really changed? And they would essentially start with saying that, look, we are seeing a lot more positivity. Our teams are telling us things are moving better. Everything we are seeing looks very good. But what has really changed? Second is it easy to do business there? And I think that's something that always has been on the minds of people. And third is, how do we expand further? What are the lessons that you would give us in terms of how we should operate in India?
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Shah, very much for speaking to us. There you have it, Dr. Anish Shah, telling us a little bit about Mahindra's key EV focus going forward. There should be some exciting new cars, EVs released very, very shortly. But also the India story over here, which remains a huge draw, and the reasons for that being the case. It's been another fascinating year at the World Economic Forum here in Davos, Switzerland, certainly on the sidelines of the WEF as well. That's because the India story is certainly resounding over here in terms of international interest. It's also a story which is backed by considerable GDP growth numbers. The RBI governor telling us today that 7%, possibly even more in 2024, 2025 is something to look forward to. We've got one of India's finest industrialists, a real inspiration to industry, but also to those who follow Indian industry. Mr. Godrej, wonderful to have you on the program today. Thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about the macro story on India this time. There is an overall sense of positivity, I sense. In speaking to a lot of people over here, what are you hearing?
Absolutely. Everyone is very impressed by India. There have been geopolitical crises. We have just come out of the pandemic, but all of this India seems to have weathered very well, except for the first year of the pandemic when there was this negative growth. Since then we've had excellent growth. 3 years of about 7% growth looks on the cards, and the whole world is impressed by this. India has not been affected by these crises, and that's a great credit to our government and our people.
Sir, you are looking to expand in palm oil processing in Agrovet. Could you tell us a little bit about timelines, what the plans are?
Yes. We started the palm oil industry in 1989 because we needed raw material for our oleochemical industry. Though actually we sold all of it for edible purposes. There was slow, steady growth, and we have about 65,000 hectares already planted, some of it very recently, so not yet yielding. We are producing about 120,000 tons of oil already, but the 65,000 hectares, we are planning to add 100,000 hectares in the next 4 years. I should clarify that all of this is grown by smallholder farmers. We only do the milling and we provide the planting material, and more we have our Samadhan centers.
Yes.
Where we do leaf testing, soil testing, give the farmers excellent advice. So they save on fertilizer, and excessive fertilizer causes pollution. So we avoid that pollution by giving them the exact dose. We also advise them to add sulfur if necessary. Sulfur improves the oil content. And the government's new policy is encouraging more and more farmers. And we have just announced loans for our farmers with the collaboration of the State Bank of India. And this means it's a bright future. And over the years, we hope to keep up this pace. We are well established in Andhra Pradesh. We just met with the Telangana Chief Minister here, and we are expecting to expand faster in Telangana, also in Orissa, and 4 northeastern states that are contiguous.
So the animal feed business is obviously something which is absolutely huge. It is also closely associated with the success of the monsoon. Your numbers have been positive. Your Q2 numbers were very good in cattle and aqua feed volumes grew 16% and 15% respectively. The reason I ask you this question is because we talk about climate change over here at Davos in a big way, and it's something which directly impacts your industry when it comes to rainfall, and the fact that it's been irregular, even if the overall numbers have been okay. Is this something that concerns you?
It concerns us to some extent, and there are ups and downs, but there have been ups and downs in the agricultural industry always. The good thing about our agribusiness is we have several different businesses, and they're not affected the same way each time. So we find that always one business is hit and the other businesses benefit from that hit. So it works out in the end. But climate change is getting more and more serious. I've attended several sessions here in Davos. We are getting close to tipping points. It's really, really sad because the cost of adaptation is greater than the cost of prevention. Any logical person would go for prevention, not adaptation. Unfortunately, for prevention, we need a level playing field. If we had some uniform carbon price all over the world with a uniform cap and trade or even a uniform carbon tax collected by individual states, we would solve this problem in a jiffy. And I'm urging the world to do something. Otherwise, we'll have to depend on new technology, and that's the other thing we need to pursue. But we'll have to do many, many things simultaneously to solve this problem. But if we cross tipping points, it's going to be a disaster.
What are some of the technologies that you'd be interested in when it comes to the agricultural sector?
Anything that sequesters carbon, and because we are in an agri-business, we are really looking at producing more food from trees. Oil palm is already there. We are expanding it. Every time you plant an oil palm tree, you're sequestering carbon. We are working with the American company Terviva. They have developed Pongamia, which is a tree known in India, Karanj. We used to use the oil to make soap, but they have succeeded in making the protein and the oil human edible. So if we can get more and more food from trees, we can sequester carbon while we feed our population. Even in the field, we can try regenerative agriculture. That keeps the soil healthy. We can put organic carbon in the soil. That carbon gets sequestered for many, many years, and the yields improve. So all these solutions, I'm particularly interested, but of course there are solutions like better transportation methods, more forms of green energy. The wind and solar are excellent. They're competitive with coal today, but they're sporadic. We also need more storage or more baseload energy or time of day pricing so that we require less storage. And for baseload energy, we really need to look at modular nuclear, and I myself am very interested in biomass. There was a bamboo conference in Mumbai just before I left, and our Chief Minister Eknath Shinde was over there as well. Bamboo is very promising, the yields are excellent, and the roots sequester carbon even while we cut the stalks and burn them as a green biofuel, and which can provide energy round the clock.
You mentioned modular nuclear. Are you optimistic about that? Because it's a controversial choice at one level. But many say it's the only way forward. I mean,
nuclear is an extremely green technology. It's controversial as an unsafe technology. But modular nuclear, a small modular nuclear, is expected to be very, very safe. And I was speaking to Westinghouse. They claim they have large modular nuclear, which is equally safe. So we do need to look at it and say cautiously, make sure that the safety is good, and then yes.
I must ask you, since we are talking about sustainable growth, and it is obviously at one level linked very closely to to the environment. And my next question is, every year we go through this stubble burning in Punjab. It affects large parts of North India. In fact, the entire Indo-Gangetic plain has air pollution levels which are horrific. There is an industrial solution to this. Nobody seems to have the money to actually do it, to take the stubble and recycle it and perhaps use that biomass towards electricity or some other areas.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's, it can be done, it should be done. CII had a project. We can all work together on doing that. We are now working on our scope 3 emissions, and some of this stubble comes from our raw materials for animal feed. Yes. And we are also trying to look for solutions. As you said, it can be burnt as biomass. The only problem is biomass is bulky, freight costs are high.
Yes.
Ideally, you should burn it nearby. But even that can be worked out. And there are other solutions, like you can put the stubble in the soil for mulching, which sequesters the carbon in the soil at least for some time and improves the yields. But the farmers are impatient. There's a very short period of time between the two crops. Another thing we can do is maybe increase that time period, then the compulsion to burn will be less.
Yes.
And we can change the crops we grow, which might also mean a bigger period between the two crops, and therefore the compulsion to burn would be less.
Sir, just one or two more questions. The Godrej Group obviously hugely diversified, different parts of the family and others deal with different parts of the business. I'm fascinated by the defense sector and Godrej Aerospace. Is this something that the group thinks about very, very closely? Because it is something that's really growing in India.
Yeah, definitely. The group has been thinking about that, and defense and aerospace has been an important part of it. And we have been working with ISRO for many, many years.
Yeah, parts of Chandrayaan,
yes,
which is the latest with
the rocket engines have been used in many projects. It's not just for Chandrayaan, but it has a long history. And we have always been ready to serve the nation. And it was ISRO who approached us. It's not something we started on our own.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful speaking to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for being with us. There you have it, Mr. Godrej, a huge inspiration for so many of us. That's how I started this interview. That's how I'm going to end it. But the sectors that he deals with personally very closely, the agriculture sector, the involvement of the Godrej Group for so many decades, absolutely critical for the growth of the Indian economy.